This is Scott Becker with the Becker Private Equity and Business Podcast. I'm thrilled today to be joined by the chair of the McGuireWoods Healthcare Department, Holly Buckley. Holly's a brilliant leader that works at the intersection of healthcare and private equity. And we're going to talk today about a couple of the healthcare topics that we're seeing in private equity. And Holly, I'd love your take on this. But what I see out there is a vast division of bolt-on deals that are going great and bolt-on deals in some of the healthcare practice specialties that are much more challenging. For example, if I look at bolt-ons in some of the lower margin specialties where they've added on debt, it seems like a whole plethora of those are running into some kind of trouble. But then in other areas, things seem to be going okay. And could you talk a little bit about what you see out there? Where are bolt-ons and growth of platforms in the healthcare services area still going fine? And where do you see some hiccups?
Yeah, thanks, Scott. So it's an interesting question. And I think we've been observing for a while that, especially with interest rates going up, a lot more of the cracks have begun to deepen for certain platforms. And so I agree that a lot of the lower margin, kind of lower specialty type platforms have probably had more struggles. Some of the higher margin specialty platforms, such as orthopedics and cardiology, tend to have gone better. I think in addition to kind of just looking at the overall margin, I think some of the difference also comes with strategy. So I think for some platforms that have had a very clear defined strategy, for example, building out ancillaries and moving cases to an outpatient setting and working towards value-based care and direct-to-employer models, have done well as they've continued to focus in and hone their core strategy, whereas platforms that have really just been in growth mode have run into more issues as leverage has become more expensive, and growth for the sake of growth doesn't necessarily pay off.
Thank you. And orthopedics, you mentioned going well. Med spa, it seems like there's so much movement in and still seems to be going well. Are there some common denominators amongst the areas that seem to be going better than others?
I'm not sure if there's one single common denominator. I think, as you mentioned, med spa is obviously very, very different to, say, cardiology. You've got one that's cash-based, retail medicine. You've got another that's highly specialized, not retail, and is very highly government pay dependent. So I'm not sure that I could identify a single common thread of the types of businesses that are doing well. I think there's just certain pockets that are doing well, that are more ripe for today's environment.
Thank you. And in particular specialties, it seems like I've been watching some of the action in OB/GYN. It seems like there's some challenges there, but it's probably too narrow a sample size to call it a trend in any way, shape, or form. So I think that's absolutely right.
We haven't seen a huge volume of OB/GYN deals. We've seen some, but to your point, it's a pretty small sample size. It's an area we historically really saw very low transactional volume in, and part of that is due to some of the unique characteristics of OB/GYN with a kind of big hospital component, also very high malpractice costs. But we have seen a few deals in that space recently, but it still remains a pretty small number.
Thank you. And what about, it seems like, and this may be a little bit in a different side, it seems like there's so many of these AI companies or digital health companies calling themselves AI companies. Are you starting to see some consolidation along those lines, or it seems to be apparently all these different AI companies can't succeed, I don't think. So do you see some consolidation or falling out there, or what are you watching there? Are you watching anything there?
Yeah, I think it's there's a lot of unknowns there at this point. I haven't seen a lot of consolidation necessarily, and it may be happening and I'm just not aware of it. But I think there are a lot of folks trying to make AI plays at this point, and I agree with you, they can't all win. And I think the bigger players are ultimately going to end up more successful, but I agree, they can't all win. And it's something that everyone seems to want to get into. But I think it's a very tough space to be successful in. It's a space that if I was investing my own dollars, I would be very, very nervous around.
Thank you very, very much. I feel bad to hear that because I think I've already invested too many of my own dollars in that space, and I think that's exactly the concern that I have. I think you're exactly right on now. It's they always say in the VC world it's often a one or a zero. In one of them, I think I'm closer to a zero on that deal, so we'll see how it goes. Anything else that you're particularly excited about as you get going with the new year? What are people saying about JP Morgan? I know we've got our own healthcare private equity event coming up in May. Anything else you're watching that you're excited about?
I'm broadly and generally very excited for the year. I'm personally very focused right now on our own department growth and development over the course of the year. We've made some big investments on the life sciences side, on the pharma side, pharma services, as well as FDA expertise, and we're looking forward to continuing to grow that area. We're also very excited about the health tech, healthcare IT space. While it can be a challenging space, it's obviously the future of healthcare, and there's a lot of work to be done there. And so we're really excited as we continue to grow and develop in those spaces. I think from a healthcare investment perspective, we remain optimistic that this is going to be a very good year. I think the change in administration is going to be good for private equity and good for investment, even though some of the existing headwinds remain. I think as far as JP Morgan goes, I'm not going to make it out there this year. Unfortunately, some of my colleagues will be there, but we are looking forward to our big healthcare private equity conference in Chicago, the 14th and 15th of May. But we're putting together a fantastic agenda for that, and we're looking forward to a very broad discussion around a number of investment themes, both on the provider side as well as outside the provider side, including life sciences and payer services and healthcare IT. So it's going to be a great event. You can always reach out to me at hbuckley@McGuireWoods.com for more information there.
Yeah, just fantastic. Holly, it's always great to visit with you on the Becker Private Equity Business Podcast. One of the great leaders I get to work with, just fantastic. Holly Buckley, Chair of the Healthcare Department at McGuireWoods, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Scott. I learned from the best, and Happy New Year to you and everyone else.